welcome back to Recipe to Revenue. I'm your host, Leah Messina, and I am here today with the co founder of a really exciting brand called Dirty Virgin. John Maloney, thanks for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's get us started at the beginning of this origin story of Dirty Virgin. How did you guys? So you have a business partner,
Yes.
James. So the two of you came up with this concept. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I always say my journey in alcohol alternatives and kind of sober nightlife happened very much on accident. And it was because my first job out of undergrad was at Anheuser-Busch. And because I was working at a big alcohol company, I was sort of bonding with my new teammates. We were traveling around, learning about different
Hmm.
parts of the business, and we were just constantly going out because that's sort of how you explore new
Yeah.
cities and how you bond with people. And I really loved the bonding part, but after a while I was like, okay, I have these fitness goals. I want to be putting my best foot forward at work. The amount
Hmm.
that we're drinking when we go out is just, causing me to be kind of lethargic and not on my best game. So I tried to start going out without drinking, realized how weird of an experience that was. The bartenders were kind of annoyed that I waited in line just to get sparkling water. And my
Sure.
friend, with the best intentions, were always a little bit let down if I didn't feel like I was fully committed to the
Hmm.
night. So since I was working at this big alcohol company, I had a chance to kind of go back to them and say, hey, I think there's people that are in the venues, our products are being sold that for whatever reason don't want to drink alcohol that night. And right now they're just switching to water. So there's probably an opportunity here
Hmm.
to create some more interesting, fun things that people can engage with. And they agreed, and they had been seeing, beer volume declining over the last couple of years. And they said, okay, great. We have this innovation program. Go into
Hmm.
there, build what you would want when you go out, and, we'll see how it goes. And so that was like my introduction into starting a brand, into kind of learning
Yeah.
about the sober curiosity space, sober nightlife, all of
Hmm.
that. And it's really all I've ever done since. And so I met my co-founder working at Anheuser-Busch. We both eventually left and went to other beverage companies. We both spent kind of our whole careers in beverage. And then Dirty Virgin specifically was because as I was talking to more bars and nightclubs and music festivals, those operators were saying, okay, people are drinking less, our bar sales are declining. We would like to offer some more non alcoholic options. But a lot of the
Yeah.
products on the market are very health and wellness focused. And we are a music festival. We want something that's fun, that's exciting, that feels like it fits in the world of cocktails and experiential nightlife. And I thought that
Hmm.
was true. So I thought to myself, if I was going to build a non-alcoholic brand for high energy nightlife, what would it look like? What would it taste like? What would the ingredients be? I called up James, my co-founder, and said, hey, I have this idea for a funny brand called Dirty Virgin. And after we talked to enough people and got enough positive feedback on the concept, we thought, you know what, let's just build it and see how it goes. And then now we're here.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. So was it a like clean slate? You guys left your day jobs and went full on speed into this, or did you kind of hover between the
Yeah,
two
it
for a
was for
bit?
me. I was at a non-alcoholic spirits company, so I used to run the U.S. marketing side of a British non-alcoholic spirits brand. So I sort of knew,
Hmm.
okay, these are similar spaces. This isn't really something I can do
Yeah,
at the same time. And I'm
yeah.
always sort of like a leap first and then figure it out later type of person. So I was
Hmm.
excited enough about the idea. I was eager enough to kind of do something
Hmm.
entrepreneurial, that I just said, okay, I'm going to walk away from my current position, do it the right way, and then start this a couple months later. So I actually ended up getting a job bartending at a Broadway theater, and that was my
Okay.
still is kind of my keep the lights on supplement,
Yeah.
whatever I'm able to earn from Dirty Virgin, which has actually been a
Right.
lot of fun. And then James was at also a beverage company. His contract was sort of coming to an end. And
Hmm.
so it was a nice transition time for him as well. And luckily, he has a very supportive wife that currently acts as the breadwinner. So, yeah, we
Yeah.
both were very lucky. We were able to find kind of side things to help us do this full time.
Yeah. To bridge the gap. So
Mhm.
coming from the innovation space at Anheuser-Busch and where you are now, was there areas that you felt like really strong in and then areas that you were like, I have no idea how to do this part about the beverage world? And what were they?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I always say we at least had a roadmap going into it. We had sort of been through the process of coming up with an idea, working with a recipe developer, with graphic designers to create a product.
Hmm.
Um, how we used to do it at Anheuser is we would launch it in a couple of markets, measure some KPIs to see how it was doing, and then use that to inform, the future of the business. And so those were all really nice roadmaps to have. But when you have the resources of one of the largest beverage companies in the world,
Sure.
very
Yeah.
different from doing it on your own. So we
Yeah.
always joke and stuff and say, we would call up a supplier at Anheuser and say, hey, can I just get, a sample of this ingredient? And they'd be like, of course, whatever you want, and they don't really do that anymore. So a
Mhm.
nice roadmap to
Yeah.
follow, but doing it fully from scratch is a whole other beast. And
So what was your timeline from the concept of it to actual, like, product sample?
I would say about 6 months before when we really decided, okay, this is the concept. We sort of know what we want this thing to look, taste like, all of
Mhm.
that. Then we were able to sit down with the recipe developers. And we also had some friends that were bartenders and mixologists that helped
Mhm.
us kind of workshop the right flavor profiles and all of that. And then from going back and forth with the recipe team, sort of finding the exact right balance of flavors and everything that we wanted, our first version of the product was ready to go in about 6 months, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good timeline for a, startup company, I think, to get things going. But you obviously had a lot of knowledge going into it, which is a lot of roadblocks that people that don't come from a big company perhaps know, right?
Yeah. And I'm such a fan of you can do as much research and pre work as
Mhm.
possible, but you're always going to learn new things when you're in market. So I think we could have iterated until the end of time, trying to get it exactly right before we launched. But I feel like we got it in a solid spot. We wanted to get it out into the world and just start learning from real people. And then, every production run is a new chance to iterate. So, we still
Mhm.
update, we still tweak, we still learn new things. But I didn't want to sort of have perfect be the enemy of good, as people like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, get it out there, see what the response is. And so what flavors did you launch with to start off with?
We started with a margarita, a mule, and a spritz. And those are still
Mhm.
sort of our main three that we have today. And the reasoning behind that was because, I wanted somebody to be able to walk up to a bar, see it on a menu, and have a pretty clear idea of what the product was. I didn't want the bartenders to have to do a lot of explaining or sort of educating people on what
Mhm.
this, aperitif with a proprietary functional blend is. I wanted to be, pretty
Yeah.
approachable and pretty simple for the everyday social drinker who was just trying to sort of cut back for maybe that night or maybe just that round. And
Mhm.
those were sort of the most popular flavors. We talked to a lot of bartenders to say, okay, what are the highest volume cocktails you're serving? And those constantly rose to the top. And we also knew that there was enough flavor going on there that even without alcohol, they had really distinctive sort of signature flavors that we could replicate in a non-alcoholic product. It's
Yeah.
hard to do a non-alcoholic martini, but it's a little bit easier to have, lime, agave, orange, all of those key
Sure.
margarita flavors.
Yeah, so if somebody were earlier in the night having a traditional margarita and then switch to the Dirty Virgin margarita, it would be a
Totally.
pretty seamless switch at that point.
Yeah, and 90% of the people who buy non-alcoholic beer, wine, and spirits still do drink alcohol. I have a martini and a French 75 tattooed on the back of my arm, so I still,
Nice.
enjoy a cocktail
Yeah.
here and there. So really for us, it's a moderation play. It's not really one or the
Yeah.
other. So we know that most of our customers maybe are starting their night with a full strength drink, or they're taking an edible before
Mhm.
they come, or now there's THC products or drinks that people can
Mhm.
get. And then they're switching to non-alc, halfway through the night to avoid the hangover, to avoid
Yep.
interactions, that sort of thing. So we really wanted to make sure our product fits seamlessly into somebody's, consumption journey throughout the night, no matter what their night had in store. So keeping some really familiar kind of classic cocktail flavors was the best way that we felt to do.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, excellent. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense, especially for those that still do drink alcohol. Like, I was thinking we went to a concert and, like, you can start out early at night. You're excited to be there, but as you get closer to have to drive home, you don't want to keep going at that same pace. So,
And I also
uh,
feel like I would go to concerts and stuff, and I was, you were there to see the artist, we're there to
yeah.
have this experience, and I sort of would walk in, and my, monkey brain would be like, "Go to the bar, go to the bar," and you sort of stop and
Hmm.
be like, "Why?" Like, that's not
Why?
why I'm here. Like, what? I don't even want to have a
Yeah.
drink right now, but it just feels like the habit, and so I feel like
Hmm.
those were the spaces that we felt the biggest tension with consumers that they were trying to find something more interesting instead of just going towards the bar to get a drink because that's what they're used to doing.
Mhm.
And yeah, so really like these nightlife spaces that are curating experiences for people, we really believe in those. And I always say, the self-expression and the community and sort of the creativity that nightlife fosters, I think is such a positive thing in the world. So we're just trying to sort of make it
Mhm.
more accessible to more people and maybe remove alcohol as the barrier to entry where people feel like I'm not going to have fun if I'm not drinking. So if I'm not drinking tonight, I'm staying home. We want to eliminate that.
Right.
I'm taking the night off text. You can still go out. You can
Yeah.
still have a good time. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So you made that very conscious decision to launch the product in these entertainment venues rather than retail or e-commerce. Tell us about that. The first couple steps that led you to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the place that we found the tension was the most pervasive. And so a lot of when we would talk to consumers, it was in those types of occasions. It was concert venues, clubs, comedy clubs, sort of what I call
Hmm.
experiential nightlife, that they felt the biggest tension of, I still want to be in these places. I still want to
Hmm.
spend time with my friends and family in these occasions, but I just don't want to drink every time I do it. So that was sort of a no brainer from the consumer side. I also think, in beverage, that's a chance that you get to curate the customer's experience with your product. So, there's already the atmosphere set up by the venue. You're likely listed on a menu so people can sort of see it
Hmm.
there and they're scanning the menu. They're a little bit more primed to want to try something new. You have a
Yeah.
bartender there that you can sort of educate on how to serve the product. It's cold, it's in sort of the right occasion. So I think it's a great place to build a brand. And so that was, some of the reasons we wanted to go with experiential nightlife to start. And then kind of the way that we found in with venues is we would have event producers who knew that part of their audience was sober, part of their
Hmm.
audience just wasn't
Mm.
drinking as much as maybe they used to. And so we would partner with the producer. They would go to the venue and say, hey, we have this event coming up. I really want a non alcoholic option on the menu. I have this brand I really
Yeah.
like. Do you mind if we bring some cases in just to like for the night, just so I can have it
Mm,
for my
interesting.
event? Yeah. And then, luckily, most of the time it would go well and people would enjoy the product. The bartenders would think it was cool. So then we would be able to follow up and sort of turn that into a placement with that venue. Um,
Hmm.
and I also think, especially here in New York City, nightlife really is a very tight knit community. So when you're able to walk into a venue and say, hey, I'm a local brand, I live here in Brooklyn, this is what I'm trying to do. A lot of times they are really creative people and they want to support local brands. So it's a little bit easier to manage those relationships than when you're just going straight to, a chain store buyer who is just scanning the
Yeah.
numbers and is like, great, you're not in any retailers yet. Call me when you're at 5 million in gross revenue. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's nice to be able to start on that personal level, and because you're able to get that feedback from people more quickly as well and
Yeah.
see, how it's sitting with the customer. But yeah, that's an interesting angle too that you said about going to the producers, because I could totally see like certain, you know, music performers or maybe at like a comedy show or something where the audience maybe doesn't drink as much or just
Mhm.
doesn't, lend itself to, that's, I don't know, super crazy wild crowd,
Yeah.
but they still want to be there and enjoy the evening, and they still want to have something in their hand and be part of that experience. So,
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny. Like we would go. One of our first accounts was this big club in Bushwick called Silo,
mhm.
and the owner there, Alex, I try to shout him out whenever I can because he's so great to work with. But we would go through the calendar with him, and he'd be like, "Okay, this show, that crowd drinks, and so that's not a good
Yeah.
one for you to activate at. But like the show after this, whatever the genre of music is, like you could go by and say these people
Yeah.
drink, these people don't. This is kind of a wild card. This is whatever." And I found that to be true across venues that they really have a good understanding of what communities, what crowds, what music genres, what that audience is going to be like. And so it's kind of been fascinating to learn about that side
Yeah.
of it too. Because they know it in
Yeah.
such a level of granularity that we didn't.
Yeah, and good on him for being that aware about those audiences as well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's such great insights for you. So beyond the venue experience, how have you continued to cultivate the relationship with customers?
Yeah, so we wanted to kind of, launch the product, see what was working, see what wasn't. So we ran what we call a proof of concept here in the city. So we sold
Hmm.
into 30 independent venues. And it was about half bars and clubs, half, natural grocery stores because we wanted to kind of try a
Okay.
couple different channels and see what was working.
Mhm.
Um, and then we had some pretty good results with that. So like we were outselling athletic brewing in a lot of our on-premise accounts and
Mm.
our bars and clubs. And when we would do sampling events at our grocery stores, we had above a 50% conversion rate. Which when we were, launching products back at Anheuser, we would always use 25 to 30% as kind of the benchmark of if that's your sampling
Mhm.
conversion rate, that's a pretty good sign. So we felt really encouraged by those results. And that gave us the confidence to start to scale up a little bit. So now we're just in a little over 100 accounts here in the city. And actually now
Okay.
it's like a 25% bars and clubs, 75% grocery store mix, just because there's
Okay.
so many more grocery
Yeah.
stores in the city than there are clubs.
Sure.
Yeah, and I like that omni-channel approach to it. So we really try to, build the brand in those nightlife spaces. That's where I want people to discover the brand for the first time. That's where a lot of our marketing lives, a lot of our
Mhm.
activation. But then, that same customer is going to their local bodega
Yeah.
or their local, Union Market the next day, and then they get to see a brand that, oh my God, I tried that at Silo, and now I can pick it up
Yeah.
and have it at home. So really trying to take that approach with it of, discover in the on-premise and then create some repeatable
Mhm.
purchase in the off-premise is how we've tried to build the business, at least here in New York.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense too. You're just not gonna keep going to concerts just to get a beverage.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
it could be a highlight of it, but yeah, you do want to go into the store and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna have a cocktail party at home and I want to bring that in.
yeah. And
Um,
it's, I mean, it is something like we are always learning. And I feel like there definitely is the use cases are there in the off premise, but it is something that we're still, kind of workshopping because it's really clear to me what the use case
mhm.
is in the bars and clubs. But I'm still
Mhm.
trying to learn from, our early purchasers. Like, okay, when you take this home, are you just having it at the end of the day? Are you waiting? Are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
having friends over? Like, are you using this at a pregame? And I feel like really trying to figure out exactly how people are using the product when they buy it at grocery stores is one of like the
Mhm.
learning is that we're trying to prioritize right.
And how are you going about doing that? Are you surveying them? Are you asking them on social?
Yeah, it's surveying. We do a lot of sampling. I
Mm-hmm.
think I have 3 events this weekend. I'm gonna go stand at a
Yeah.
grocery store and sample the
Uh-huh.
product and talk to people. And, now we've been in market for long enough that we find people who have purchased it before and we can ask them.
Yeah. Nice.
We do a little bit of direct to consumer e-commerce. So, when somebody
Mm-hmm.
purchases, we always like to follow up with an email and say, thank you so
Mm-hmm.
much. I'm curious, like, how did you end up using it? And, when did you drink it and all that kind of stuff. And usually, when it's the founder of a brand reaching out, people are excited to sort of help and be part of the early, stages of getting this brand off the ground. So you people
Mm-hmm.
are usually pretty excited to share their feedback and anything
Yeah.
that they have to say about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of that. And then also like talking to the grocery store managers and everything. I mean, they see those products being pulled off the shelves every day. They have this really good idea of the types of people that seem to be coming in, where different consumers go to different parts of the store. So trying to lean
Mm-hmm.
on them as much as we can too to build that relationship because they have a vested interest in it doing well, of course.
Right. And are the grocery stores that you're in now, are they also independents or are you getting into any chains at this point?
This is so people like to say that New York is a really difficult market to start a brand in, and there definitely are cons to it. It's very expensive, it's
Mm-hmm.
very crowded. When you walk into a grocery store in New York and every non-alcoholic functional niche product you could ever imagine
Yeah.
is already right there. So it's a very
Yeah.
crowded market. But what I like about it and why I think it was the right place to sort of start this brand is because there are almost no chains here. Like it really is almost
Mm-hmm.
all independents, especially in
Yeah.
Manhattan. Which means you can go into one bar, one grocery store, you can try something and maybe it won't work. And then, if that doesn't work out, then great, you learn something and you go to the grocery store next door and you can start over. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a really great place to sort of workshop and learn about your product. But now we're in a place where, we've not saturated. I don't think you could ever saturate New York City, but we have
Yeah.
decent distribution here in the city. So we're starting to expand into some grocery store chains. And specifically, we're finding the right distribution partner right now because we have authorizations at some natural grocery stores up and down the Northeast. So trying
Mm-hmm.
to find sort of that scale partner who can service those. And fundraising to be able to support them with the marketing that they need, which is always a fun
Sure.
exercise for consumer companies, is sort of the next phase of the business that we are working on.
Yeah. That's exciting. Exciting to those are good problems, right? Like you're at that point where growth is there, and you see the scalability right in front of you, but there, some big steps to get over to make it all happen.
Yeah, and it always
So,
feels like when you're in the day to day of it, you feel like you're
mhm,
not moving anywhere, and it's so fun to,
yeah,
catch up with a friend you haven't seen in 6 months and give them the update and have them say, "Oh my
yeah,
god, like, you've done so much in 6 months," and then you get to think, "Oh, yeah, we
right,
kinda have." So it's nice to
yeah,
step
yeah.
back every once in a while and realize, "Yeah, we are. We're making a lot of progress here."
Yeah, 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 that's a great point because yeah, the day to day, you're like, "Nothing is happening. It's going so
Yeah.
slow. I want to be here, but I'm here." So yeah,
Mhm.
it's good to have that external reminder. So I'm curious, how do you? But you both come from the beverage world, but so how do you and James divide up the responsibilities in the company?
Yeah, we have very complementary skill sets. And so
Hmm.
I'm much more sort of brand marketing. I really love storytelling. I like, the high level strategy of it all. And James, in addition to being from the beverage industry, is an ex consultant. And so he's in the spreadsheets
Hmm.
all day. And
Okay, nice.
he's the one who's like, let's RFP 7 different providers for this, and then I have this whole matrix that I'm going to make the decision on. So I do a lot of branding, marketing, sort of fundraising. He does a lot of the finance and operations, and we sort of naturally fall into those buckets.
Hmm.
But something I always, and we reminded ourselves of this the other day, is we definitely disagree on things. And I tend to be let's just jump and we'll figure it out later and we're
Yeah.
excited and it's great. And he's no, let's really go through a
Like,
rigorous process to make this
it-
decision.
let's analyze
And so
this first.
sometimes, yeah, exactly. And so sometimes we have disagreements about that, but then we always find a nice middle ground. And we were having a conversation
Hmm.
the other day where I was like, we have to remember that's the point. Like, if we were both the exact same way of working, then this wouldn't be a good partnership. The reason that
Sure.
we end up making well informed decisions is because we can come at it from both sides and find that middle ground. So sometimes we have to embrace the conflict in that way. But I think
Hmm.
it is a net benefit for our decision making in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, sounds like it. Did you going into this, you said you gave him a call and said you had this idea. Did you know those things about him at that point, or why did you think you guys would make good partners?
Yes, yeah, we had worked together at Anheuser, so we had a little bit of a taste of what it was like to work together, and I think we had a very similar dynamic there. And at the end of the day, too, I always say we started a company together, so we obviously, respect each other. We think each other
Sure.
is smart and capable, and
Trust
all of
each other
this.
too.
Yeah, so it's a nice, foundation of trust, exactly. That is why we're doing this in the first place. So then once we can sort of ground ourselves there, then it's a lot easier to have tougher conversations.
Right.
But yes, that was kind of how we worked at Anheuser. We got put on a team together kind of by chance, and we just kind of enjoyed doing the pilots together. And then eventually we kind of became a two-person team that would always work on the same concepts. And so we got to kind of
Okay.
go through the process a couple times together, which was nice.
Okay. Yeah. So you got a couple of run throughs together to see, how it all would potentially work out.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of
Yes.
people don't tend to have that opportunity, so that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to circle back. So you said you're the more the branding and strategy mind in the group. I love the humor that you guys use in Dirty Virgin. Even the smallest text on your website, just
Mhm.
it makes you laugh, makes you say, I'm like, so it- tell us about how you decided, like, kind of has a little bit of like the epic energy. Yeah,
Mhm.
we're here, like it or not. Talk to us about that. How did you decide to
Yeah,
go that route?
definitely. Yeah, so the whole brand, the brand name is Dirty Virgin. Our tagline is "Virgins have more fun." Now, one of the insights that I always had in this space, and I thought was so funny, was it was more, back in 2018 when I started working in it. This was a lot more common, but I tell people I was doing a non-alcoholic cocktail or a non-alcoholic beer,
Mhm.
and the emotional wall that would go up. People would be like, "Why? Like, why are you not fun? Whatever." And it was just so
Yeah.
funny to me the intense reactions people had to it. And then you would have, a little bit of a conversation, and lo and behold, we would then go on a 30-minute talk about, actually, I always every year I say I'm going to drink less and it is really hard to go out, whatever. So
Mhm.
I just always felt like there was this strange emotional attachment to, like, drinking alcohol was the sign that you were the fun person at the party, and people
Sure.
got really kind of uptight when you suggested otherwise, maybe. And so I like to say that I do think most people want to drink less, but I think most people are afraid their life is going to be boring if they do.
Yeah.
So Dirty Virgin is, this satirical joke about what does it mean to be a virgin drinker and what is the emotional baggage that comes with that, the stick in the mud, the kind of pure and innocent, goody two shoes that doesn't drink or is, moderating,
Mhm.
whatever, and just making fun of it.
Yeah.
Because to me, some of the most insane personalities I have ever met, and especially working in nightlife, a lot of the nightlife performers, the bartenders, the club owners, the DJs don't drink or don't drink very much. So this
Mhm.
idea that, your alcohol consumption is tied to how vibrant or exciting of a life you can live, just this cultural myth that I think we've come up with, in Western culture for some reason.
Right.
And so, yeah, I wanted the brand to be just like a funny comment on that. And so everything we do is kind of taking that idea and flipping it on its head. And on social media, we'll do these confessional booths where people confess their drunken sins and they earn back their virginity. Or at
Nice.
clubs, we'll go out and we'll pass out V cards to people in the crowd and they can redeem them at the bar for a free can. So I think it's just giving people an
Smart.
excuse to laugh, a chance to laugh, a chance to sort of engage with a
Yep.
category that I think otherwise has felt kind of serious, and just realize,
Mhm.
this can also play a role in your life. It doesn't need to be a big lifestyle declaration to buy a
Right.
non-alcoholic cocktail.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you said that part too. No, and I encourage everybody. We'll put the link down in the show notes and in our blog post that goes with this episode because take a look at their website. You will not be disappointed at all. But I think that we are at the point where maybe for the greater audience of people where there's more acceptance of non-alcoholic drinks, or at least you get less slack from people
Mhm.
perhaps. We're starting to see that, but I'm still surprised like when I go into some of the grocery stores here, and I'm in New York too, but in Westchester, the NA section is so tiny. Like
Mhm.
the selection is just not very appealing, and I see all these like amazing brands online, and like, I just wish there was more. That I don't know if it's the stores aren't bringing them in or whatnot yet, but
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to having more selection soon in
Yeah.
the markets here.
What I say to people all the time, when you work in consumer goods, you're just constantly surrounded by what's the newest trend. And so people who
Yeah.
work in the industry will be like, it's a really crowded market and it's already pretty developed. And you just stop and say, is it? I mean, ask just an everyday person on the street to name a non-alcoholic cocktail brand, and I can promise you
Hmm.
they can't. Even if
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
seen, oh, I sober curiosity is a big trend. And they might have seen it on the news, but that doesn't mean they've engaged with it. That doesn't mean there is any brand
Sure.
awareness out there. So I do a lot of my time, especially fundraising, is reminding people this is still a very new category. And it's been
Hmm.
growing for about a decade now, but we're just starting to like cross
Yeah.
into that hockey stick territory. We're not there
Right.
yet.
Right.
So we're still in building mode.
Yeah. Yeah. Just at that beginning point too. Then
Yeah.
we should see more adoption of it. But have you in putting the product out there in the space, or is there any issues in regulations or licensing or anything that you've had to deal with that kind of maybe surprised you guys?
Not necessarily. I think actually what we've been surprised by is a lot of the products that are on the market today sort of started in this functional ingredient territory with,
Mm,
adaptogens and nootropics or nootropics. I feel like it's 50-50 on how people like to say it. I
yeah,
never know if I'm saying it right.
I've heard both.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and CBD and now even THC beverages, at grocery stores. And learning more about those products and sort of how they can interact with alcohol has been a really interesting learning for us because, sometimes we would go to festivals and they would say, "Oh yeah, we wanted to bring in this brand, but it had CBD and, either we can't get
Hmm.
insurance for that or there was concerns where if people were drinking, is this going to interact?" When you poke around on some of those websites, it'll say, don't drink more than 4 of these in a day. Don't drink if you're pregnant. Don't mix
Yeah.
with alcohol, all these sort of things.
Yep.
And so that was just a really interesting learning for us. And it's the reason that we decided not to include adaptogens and nootropics in our products because we wanted them to be perfectly safe to mix with whatever you were doing. So it's
Hmm.
nice as we are fully non-alcoholic. We don't have functional ingredients that you have to worry about interactions with. We have an electrolyte blend in all of them, so they're nice and hydrating. They're, sort of the perfect
Hmm.
pregame companion, we call them. But that was just a strange kind of like learning about the industry that we had doing a lot of the research for the brand. and
Right.
informed a lot of how we did our recipe development as a result.
Yeah, no, that's a yeah, interesting point too. And yeah, there's so many. I guess I'm sure you've seen too. A lot of the beverage brands that have started in one space eventually have then entered in a product that has one of these nootropics or
Yeah.
something into it. But I don't know if consumers really understand all that yet. It seems like a
Hmm.
very industry thing. Like, oh, what does this do? Is it going to alter my mental state, or is this a beverage? Is it going to make me feel a certain way? So there's still a lot of education I feel that needs to happen with, how we're
Yeah.
expanding on these beverages. Uh,
I was doing a sampling event the other day at a non-alcoholic bottle shop here in the city, and the
mhm.
woman who was running the counter that day, she was in the middle of getting a degree in herbal medicine, and I was like, "Oh, that is
Okay.
so interesting." Like, we've been looking into all these ingredients that are in these products, and we had like a 2-hour conversation about it. And she
Yeah.
was like, "I just don't think people understand what these ingredients are and
Yeah.
how to use them, and some of the mixtures that people come up with make me nervous." So yeah, I don't know. I think
Mm,
there's definitely a market for it, and there's a way to do it responsibly, and there's a use case
right.
for it, of course. But knowing that we very purposefully wanted to be in these nightlife places that alcohol was going to be around, we
Yeah.
felt like it wasn't the right move for us to dive into that territory just to make sure we were being as safe as possible.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Uh, so on the funding side of the business, so you said that that's something that's upcoming for you guys. What are you doing to get ready to? Are you going to do a funding roadshow, or are you
Yeah.
doing? What's the plan?
It's so manual. So it's a lot of, because you're really in consumer, sure, any consumer founder you've talked to, your initial instinct is, I'm going to go find a venture partner and they'll give me $2 million, and then they'll just be our bank for the
Right.
project and it'll be great. And then, you'll meet with a venture fund that's like, we do the earliest stages of consumer and we're there with you from the beginning. And they'll say, yeah, we start to write our first check sizes as early as when you're doing $1 million in gross revenue. And it's like, well, that's not early. Like,
Yeah.
that's a pretty developed
Right.
company. So you're kind of on your own to get yourself to that point, and that threshold keeps getting pushed back and back. So pretty early on, we
Yeah.
realized, okay, venture is not how we're going to start this thing. It's really, angel investors. It's people within your
Hmm.
network. It's maybe a family office or two. And
Hmm.
finding those types of financial backers is really the wild west. So, we have a couple strategies that we do to try to find people either at trade shows, or we join a lot of,
Hmm.
industry networks that we can go to networking events and stuff in the city,
Hmm.
or things like trying to find other consumer beverage or consumer packaged goods companies that recently exited, and trying to
Yeah.
get in contact with, senior leadership at that team. Cause a lot of times, those are the believers in the space. Those are the ones who have seen
Sure.
success. They know the roadmap to make it work. And those have been some of our most successful conversations, when we can find people that really specialize in the industry. So it's
Hmm.
it's a labor of love, I would say. It's a lot of, just cold outreach on email and LinkedIn and sliding into people's DMs. But once we get the numbers up, we've seen some good turnover with it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. It takes a lot of persistence and patience and
Mhm.
belief in what you're doing to keep you going.
I think it's like attrition warfare at the end of the day.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
real. All right, John, before we wrap up today, we have my last question for you. And then looking at the path that you've taken the last couple of years and the success that you've had, what do you think has been your recipe to revenue?
Okay, I feel like I spoiled it, but my answer to this is just start. Just do it. Just start.
Mhm.
I feel like,
Yeah.
it's a harsh reality, but people always say, ideas are worthless. It's all in execution. So I feel like if you are excited about something, if you have an idea that you've been wanting to
Yeah.
do for a while, and you're going through the cycles of retweaking the strategy, rethinking everything about it before you get the exact perfect solution that you're going to launch with, I would say just
Hmm.
start. Get it out there,
Yeah.
learn from people. You can always iterate later. I promise, whatever you think is going to happen, something else is going to happen and might even be better.
Hmm.
So I would say, don't keep the idea in your head. Just get started with it, and you'll learn and you'll get better as you go. So I
Yeah.
think that is probably my biggest piece of advice to people who come to me and say, I have this idea. I don't know how to get started. And I say, it doesn't really matter how you get
Just
started.
do it.
Just do it.
Yeah. I love it. Yep, I love that advice. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights today. And before we wrap up, let people know where can we find Dirty Virgin today if they're in New York or not.
Yes. So if you're in New York, our website is drinkdirtyvirgin.com. And you can order
Mhm.
online. We ship nationwide, so you can always try it out that way. We have a store locator on there. So if you're in the area, you can see what stores nearby might have it. And then, always go request it at your local bar, and then they'll reach out to us and maybe we
Yeah.
can stock it there too. So
Yeah.
drinkdirtyvirgin.com is a great way to discover everything about.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, great to have you on. And thank you again for sharing the Dirty Virgin story. We're excited to
Yeah, of
see where
course.
you
Thank you
head
so
next.
much.
All right. Talk soon. Thanks for listening to Recipe to Revenue. If you're building in the food, beverage, or hospitality space, you're in the right room. Subscribe for more founder stories and real world growth strategies. And if this episode helped, share it with a friend and leave a review. It's how this show grows. For tools, templates, and ways to work together, visit recipe2revenue.co. I'm Leah Messina. Until next time, keep cooking up the next revenue stream.